Hi everyone, I'm Amy.
And I'm Audrea.
This is the Right Crowd, so grab a cup of coffee,
Or a delightful cup of tea.
maybe a little something on the rocks, and let's get started. And I cannot tell a lie. This is also tea. It is a ginger turmeric honey tea, something or another that I get. It is delightful. It is delightful. There are some mornings I start my morning with this tea before I even make my coffee.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I likes it. I don't need coffee. I like the taste of coffee, of good coffee, but sometimes I like to start my day. I may have to start my day tomorrow with it now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay. Thanks for
Okay.
sharing that.
Well, I figure I started the last one talking about my cup collection,
Yes, you did.
that I
Yes.
should talk about what's in my cups
I
today.
always, yes, and I always like to know what tea people drink. So I want to know, you should send me a message which brand tea that is, because I might try it. I'm just drinking regular black tea, but I have put in here some greens because I'm getting my vegetables in like a greens powder, so it tastes. I know it. I'm hoping it doesn't turn my whole mouth, all my teeth green, but it's
I hope it does.
a wild apple flavored greens, and it is green. It is very green.
You do know that apples are not vegetables, right?
Oh yeah, fruits and vegetables. Yes, true. I do
Okay.
know that, and I know tomatoes are not vegetables as well.
Have you seen the thing where the guy goes, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing to put it in your salad or something like that. Like it's one of those.
That's funny.
Yeah. If I actually got it right, it would have been funnier, but whatever. All right. So
Just for the fact.
hopefully this one will not be as comical unless Audrea edited all the fun stuff out, and then you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. But the last one was fun for me anyway. Maybe not so much for Audrea. It was fun for me.
It was hilarious and painful at the same time. I felt bad for you guys who were tuned in for serious talk about intuitive editing.
We have been doing this for 3 years. They know there's not going to be serious.
That's true. That's very true.
We might have had a couple that were serious, John Truby, but that's about the end of it. I mean, he set such a high bar
He
on.
did. We were just talking about that on before another video about how we measure all the other books against John Truby because it's so dense and there's so much information in it. It's
So much
when you
information.
say tome, that's John Truby's 2 or 3 books together. I've got 2 of them in physical form. But anyway,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
we are talking today again about intuitive editing by Tiffany Yates Martin. And this is our part 3. And in part 3, we are talking about line editing and about hiring a pro and training your brain.
Something that you said, I think off camera before we started videoing the last one, that I would like for you to repeat on camera was about why you have enjoyed doing this book with me as opposed to reading it by yourself. Do you remember what you said?
Yes, I do. That's funny. I did
I
forget.
want you to I want you to say it online for everybody else to hear because I think it's good.
Okay. So
And if I make a face, this is really hot. So hopefully it doesn't burn my mouse.
okay. So I will say, and I said this before we started recording, that I have had to read this book because I'm currently in the middle of an editing project, but I have enjoyed doing this book with Amy, the way we do it, more. I've enjoyed this book more because of the interaction with Amy. So if you are an author or you have an author book club, they're all good ones to do to share, but some of them that are harder to get through because they make you have to rethink your entire manuscript
Existence.
and
Yes.
your existence and reason for living and writing
Do I really want to write that bad?
are easier and more fun to do with a accountability partner or a author book club. And that is intuitive editing. It is not as painful because I am doing it with Amy or going over it with Amy.
Okay, cool. I thanks it.
All right. So now we're going to start with line editing. And for those of you who aren't at that stage or you're confused as to the different types of editing, Tiffany Yates Martin is an editor. She wrote this book because She is an editor, and she wanted to tell all the people the things that she was probably having to repeat a lot. You can tell by her examples. There are many types of editors, and there are some editors that do many types of editing. In this chapter 10, she's talking about line editing. When you think about editing your manuscript, if you are going to edit it, and most people suggest you do some kind of editing.
I mean, if you haven't gotten that by now from us, I mean, have you been paying attention?
You may be one of those perfect writers like Dean Koontz, who just writes it and just sends it
Just
out.
writes it and
Perfect.
sends it.
The
Yeah.
perfect. If you're not, there's
If
developmental.
you're anyone else but Dean Koontz.
Anyone else but Dean Koontz. Then there's at least four types of editing. There's story or developmental editing, where the editor is an expert at that particular genre, like sci-fi or fantasy or mystery or whatever, and is going to go over your story at a foundational level and tell you if the story is working or what's missing in the story. It's called macro editing. And then there is, after that, after you get your story right and you've gotten from beginning to end and you've got all the beats in there, or you think you've got all the beats in there because you've worked with a developmental editor or you've worked the story over enough times that you've gotten it right, then you skip from developmental editing into line editing. And that is what we're talking about today.
Go to page
Oh,
266.
she has the difference between line editing and copy editing.
She has written all of it out on 266. It's in the chapter. We're going to go over this chapter, but it's in the chapter about hiring a pro. And she goes through what the different types are, so you know what you're hiring and when.
See, and in here she talks about how the line edit is different. Okay, so let's just talk about. So that she says that the line edit addresses the sentence by sentence, the author's style, consistency, tone, verbiage, or the word she's using, and watches for things like echoed words, which I have highlighted in mine. And then the copy edit, sometimes called a proofread, but not technically the same. This edit checks the basic linguistic mechanics like grammar, punctuation, spelling, fact checking.
Yeah, I thought her copy edit, what she says is copy edit, was proofreading. But according to her, proofreading is a line by line comparison of the original manuscript to the final formatted galleys.
See, and that's why you know what? When you go to hire an editor, look at how they're describing the edit they're going to do on your book. That is really important because some editors will maybe flip-flop the words line and proofread, or not line and proofread, sorry, copy edit and proofread, or use the words differently, or they'll tell you that they will tell you they're doing one type of editing, but they'll include another one. I've had that happen where I've sent my book in for a developmental edit or story edit, and the editor sent back a line and copy edit with lots of red marks for punctuation and words, and it drove my little brain bonkers. It made me cry, to tell you the truth, because I wasn't ready for it. And my brain, the way my head works, I couldn't see beyond all of the other stuff to the actual story critique or edit she did. I couldn't separate the two. And also, I knew that if I changed the story, a lot of the words were going to change and the punctuation was going to change. So it's like, thank you, but uh, that was not a good time. That was,
Did you let her know that she did not do what you had hired her to do?
it was
Or did
difficult.
you misunderstand what you'd hired her to do?
I did not misunderstand. I hired a developmental or proof, or I'm sorry, not development. I hired a developmental or story editor. That is what I hired her to do.
Okay. And
Included
she took
the
it upon
other
herself.
for free. Yes. Like I'll give you more bang for your buck. The more bang for my buck actually caused me to have an aneurysm. It was not good. I'm sorry if that's a triggering word. It was not good. It was bad for me, in particular. And if
Well,
you,
see, for me, it would be too, because I'd be like, that's not what I asked you to do.
yeah.
Yeah, I would have been the same way.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I will say the last editor, the one that I used for this last read edit, she was helping me with the story because I had changed so much of the story, and I had two books based on this anyway in a series. I'm writing three books right now. So she was doing a developmental edit she did include notes about the use of the commas and some things she said she caught as she was going all the way through the book. I had cleaned most of that up with a proofreading program that I use called Pro Writing Aid. And there's also Grammarly you can use, but I use
Mhm.
Pro Writing Aid to make sure I'm getting my commas and all the punctuation right. And I'd caught a lot of it, but she said I had a punctuation tick and wasn't necessarily using it wrong, but I was using it differently, so it was disconcerting. I don't know. I don't
Right.
know if anybody other than a punctuation geek or grammar not nerd would have caught the different uses of or inconsistent uses of what was it, M dashes and N dashes, which drive me bonkers. I use them because I like the way they look on the page. But I had to go back and read the proper usage of those pieces of punctuation. So I was using them correctly and not overusing them just because I thought they were pretty. So, speaking of digressing and how we're going to make this a short video, let's go back to the beginning. Today,
Line editing.
talking about line editing. And
Okay.
yes,
Line editing directly addresses the language element of good writing.
yes.
Okay.
And she says in line edits, you'll literally go through and examine your prose sentence by sentence. And at this point, you'll worry less about story except insofar as how well your language is serving it. So that's a good indicator of what kind of editing line editing is. So developmental editing is the one you do before this. That's the editing of the story. And then line editing, you're going through your sentence and your use of your prose. And she mentions that even if you have memorized Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, the industry standard, if you didn't know, she put that in there, and the Chicago Manual of Style, which I have. English, like most languages, is constantly evolving. So that's you want to just make sure you're using the current right style for your genre because it can differ. I mean, people who write fantasy and science fiction, they make up words and uses of the language. So, and that's the reason one of the uses you'd have for a your own style guide if you're writing a big series or a style guide or story bible. All right, so she talks about how to find it in your own writing, and one of those questions you'd ask yourself is, does your language state exactly and clearly what you mean to convey? And one of the examples she uses in that sentence, and that's on 211, is, for instance, have you ever actually seen sparkling eyes? Like I think it was Twilight that they had the sparkly skin. If they were a vampire, they had sparkly skin, which became a meme. But anyway, in the line edit is where you're going to clean up a lot of your use of your words and clean up your sentences and make sure you are writing what you mean.
I will add to that. She says that streamlining and clarifying your verbiage is only part of a good line edit. The other part is the more ephemeral, artistic side of it. Do your characters speak and think in a way that is consistent with who they are?
Yeah, and that's good to remember. This is about art, not about, it's not nonfiction, it's not academic, it's fiction and it's art.
So, how to fix it? She says that you need to make it lean, and she tells you exactly what that is. And she's like going through the different layers. So, you need to make it lean, and you make it lean by decluttering your prose.
Yes.
But then, how do you do that? Well, she gives you one, two, three, four different ways to declutter your prose, including getting rid of filler words and unneeded explanations.
Yes. And I love some of her examples. She's got over adverbing, use of modifiers, unnecessary modifiers. And then my favorite is saying the same thing a different way. And this example is a good one. All of a sudden, without warning, she yelled, "Watch out." All of those were examples of saying the same thing or in a different way. Anyway,
She
and
says, say what you mean once.
one time.
I literally will be like, you already said that. Why are you telling me again?
Now, sometimes you might use things like repeated words for emphasis, but you don't use it over and over again, like a tick in your book. You don't repeat words all the time. Again, if you do repeat the words for emphasis, use it sparingly so that way it is for emphasis. So, for example, one of her examples is she felt annoyed, comma, irritated. Annoyed and irritated are the same thing. So you just repeated the sentiment. One that I had to highlight because I didn't want to do it. I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing it in my book because it irks me to no end when I read echoed words. So she fell asleep and then you see sleep again and that same word
Oh
echoed.
my gosh. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. So I didn't
Yeah.
want to do
It's
it.
mine too. It's mine too. And you know what? I wonder if it was before or after I started reading all these books on how to write and how not to write that I've started noticing things that had become a pet peeve.
Could be.
Like, but once she fell asleep, she was asleep. Really? I'm so glad we know that now.
And Jane came in and disturbed her sleep. And then she wakes up and said, "Why? I was sleeping." I was like, "Oh, just."
Oh my God, really? Yeah. But I don't know if that was something that bothered me before I started reading books about. I don't know if it made it top of mind for me.
It's a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah.
Speaking
And
of,
then she goes over showing and telling
again, yes.
again. She says, as we discussed in the chapter of the same name, both have a useful place. Pick one, whichever one serves the story most strongly.
Yeah.
And then she gives examples, of course.
And she also talks about in line editing, streamline your dialogue or your use of dialogue tags and how to use them and how not to get too fancy or overdo it. Ease off the adverbs or examples for how to streamline your dialogue. And that is one that I have to double all the time because I have a tendency to leave off the tags because I know who's talking. And if it's a like a back and forth patter thing, the tags can slow you down. But if it goes on too long, or maybe you haven't done it well enough at the beginning, then the reader loses track of who's talking. So that is something to be aware of.
I don't remember what book it was, but it was a book that was being narrated by someone whose voice already irritates me. So I almost didn't. They're an actor that also narrates books, and their voice irritates me. And I almost didn't listen to the book because of who was narrating it, except I wanted to listen to the book. And there was a good 5 minutes of dialogue where literally it was say the words, he said, say the words, she said, say the
Oh,
words, he said,
oh,
say the words, she said. And I finally was like, okay, no. And it was, thankfully, it was in the first chapter of the book. I was like, yeah, no, I can't. It was a combination of the he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said in the actor's voice that I was like, no, I
mm,
can't do it. Like clearly, if you said, Fred said, blah, 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 Ripley replied, blah, 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 and you've got a conversation going, you don't need to keep saying he said, she said. Maybe like after 5 or 6 lines, you might repeat where we're at
yes.
to make sure everybody's on the same page so nobody gets confused as to who's saying what. But it was literally like 10 lines of he said, she said. And I was like, nope, we're done.
Yeah, that drives me a little batty. And I've heard that narrators, because I'm in a group that we have had narrator guest speakers, will take it out for an author if there are too many in there so that it flows better, or for an author if it sounds better for a narration if you take some of that out. So it's not really changing the author's words, or they'll work with the author to say, well, here's what it sounds like in right now. What do you think?
Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons they always suggest that you don't just proofread your book in paper, but you also listen to the audio version,
Yeah.
and you want to listen to it the first pass of it, or the first like chunk, so the narrator doesn't get all the way through, because you don't want to pay to have it go all the way back through and you didn't catch something that didn't sound quite right. But yeah,
Or just read it to yourself out loud.
that'll catch a lot of it.
Okay. Don't use it if you don't need it. Don't overdo it.
Good tips. She has more dialogue tips, and then the avoid the verbal gymnastics and the checking for passive voice. That one is the one that always trips me up. I have to
Yeah.
double check it over and over again because am I just not being am I being lazy by using passive voice too much, or is it required by that passage or the voice for the book? So that one I have to always double check. And
And
then
she gives you, if you get confused, she gives you lots of examples of what that looks like.
yes. Okay, yeah, I want to give you just a couple of examples. So passive voice is often, but not always, signaled by be verbs. The pie was baked by Annie. That's passive. The active version of that would be Annie baked the pie. Annie did the thing. So instead of the pie was baked by Annie. So that's an example. And then she also says to one of the other tricks is to, or tips is to watch for convoluted verb tenses. That's probably one that I need to well, I'll get to the end of this edit and then I'll look for stuff like this. But like he hadn't remembered he'd told her that. That's talk about your gymnastics for a reader to have to keep track of that. So that's a good tip for,
You have too much in that, it messes up the brain
yes.
when you're reading it as a reader.
And
The trouble she had no effect on her determination. Really? That's an example she has in here, not one that I just made up.
love it. I was,
One, two, three, four hads. The trouble she had no effect on her. Really? Do you really want, literally, if that was a verse that I was reading in a book as a begin to it, I'd be like, wait, what?
yeah,
What?
you're
The
already
trouble she had. Okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. You don't want your reader having to stop and figure out if your sentence makes sense.
exactly. Don't do it. At least don't do it unless you're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I love words. I'm such a geek for English. Not that I'm not great at it, but ostensibly, objectively, I love it. So the sentence she has under watch for convoluted verb tenses, the overuse of past perfect and pluperfect can bog the reader down in verbiage. Who remembers what pluperfect means? Do you remember that from grammar school when you were diagramming sentences? What a
I,
beautiful word.
I don't know what plu is.
Well, she'll explain it. Get the book.
When she talked about when she's about to talk about purple prose, I was like, purple. Are we flowery now?
That one I was familiar with just because I've just heard so many memes or seen so many memes with purple prose and it just overwriting, overly dramatic or melodramatic writing in the purple prose, which can be not as dramatic as you think because comes off as funny. People start laughing in the wrong places. They're laughing because
Yeah.
it's so melodramatic.
Yeah. She goes through a couple of other things, vague or ambiguous words and phrases, like thing or kind of,
Yeah.
awkward, confusing, or convoluted.
Oh, I was gonna say before you go on to that, with the awkward, confusing, or convoluted, her first sentence there is just perfect. Just basically get to the point as efficiently and powerfully as possible. Just do that. So,
Take out all of the necessary stuff.
yeah, making it elegant. Go on.
The word elegant in the context of writing doesn't mean how flowery or decorative your prose is, but rather how efficiently and well the prose serves the story.
Mm,
And then she goes into some poetry examples. And I like that. Like in poetry, there's not a lot of words you don't need.
yeah,
They say what they mean to say, and then they're done.
yeah. Yeah, they have to be very precise with their words because they have
And
so.
I had never thought about it that way. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll read poetry before I start writing. I don't know, just sometimes it gets my creative brain going, and I don't. I wish it translated into my spare use of language, but it doesn't.
Right
In
now, I'm using that book behind you, A Writer's Book of Days, which we have done a video on. I'm using that book as my brain starter in the morning.
That's a good one. All right. So Also, really important that many writers forget, especially these days, unfortunately, you have to make sure your language is either culturally aware or you are culturally aware enough to know how you are using language and descriptions and make sure you are not offending people without meaning to. If you mean to offend people, go nuts. Maybe that's the kind of visceral book you are writing.
Or maybe it's a character in the book you're writing.
Yes, exactly. But you just know what you're using or how you're using the language and if you're using it correctly and you don't, again, want to use the wrong words. And she gives some examples here that I'm not going to say. But if you read this,
Which I thought was interesting that she actually put examples in here. As
yes,
I got past that part, I was like, I can't believe she actually just, but I guess it serves the purpose.
it
But I
does.
can't
Yes.
believe she just put that in there.
And they make you think and you don't know. I know I'm going to probably need to do a sensitivity read, either at the beta stage or another stage for another book idea I have in my head. I mean, maybe I should do it for this book, but I'm not doing
And
anything
see,
else.
and I'm on the other side where I'm like, I'm gonna write what I'm gonna write.
Yes.
And I'm sorry if you don't like it. It's not gonna be for everybody.
Oh, yes, you write what you want to write. Ultimately,
So
we all should write what,
yeah,
but for me, for this particular character, I just don't want to offend anyone without knowing. I just
yeah.
don't for this particular
Well,
character. Anyway, so that's covered in this chapter on line editing and of course using your words and your sentences. And she has a lot of really good examples in here and how
this is the part. This is the part I was talking about in the last video.
okay, talk about it now. How
Where I said that she took a bunch of examples from works that she worked on and put in the book.
that
This is the part.
this is it.
I thought it was in the last part. This is the part.
Which is helpful. It's good to see like whole passages like this and
Yeah.
how they worked and how the editor talks about the passages and the examples.
Yeah.
He has a lot of them in this section, which I think is great. So even if you were not considering doing a line edit, just reading this will help you. And also seeing examples like that will help. And at the end of this chapter, she says, line editing is all about the detail work. Well, I have to say, almost all editing, well, except for macro editing, which is the developmental story editing. But when you get to line editing and copy editing and proofreading, it's all about details. I mean, by the time you get to making sure you're using the right it's like with apostrophe or not the apostrophe, it's all detail work. But she does give great examples in the chapter on line editing. Okay.
The last thing I want to say on this section
Yes.
is she says, your job isn't to create the most broadly appealing voice, but an authentic one that serves your story best.
Yeah, that's really well written. I need to get my articulation and diction taken care of, which is not in this book. All right, so our next section for this video, one of
Charlie
the
wants to say hi to the people.
hi Charlie.
Hi,
Oh, he's
Charlie.
such a handsome boy. He's such a handsome boy.
He officially became ours this week.
Did he really? Oh,
Yeah.
congratulations. Oh, look at the love.
Such a good boy. He finishes up, he got his last heartworm shot and he's finishing up his medicine. But we got to, after his last shot, we got to sign on the dotted line.
Oh, that's nice.
Actually, it was really like click a button online. It wasn't like paperwork like normal.
Very cool.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted y'all to see my new baby.
All
So
right,
the last section, unless you have anything else to go on online editing,
go ahead.
is called Getting Feedback. And she goes on, it's about how to train your editor brain, the frugal author's guide to getting editorial feedback and hiring a pro. Which kind of, we've already talked about hiring a pro.
Talked a little bit about it, but she gives you the details.
Yeah.
So in this section, she explains all the different ways to get feedback on your book, like a critique group or a critique partner, looking for examples in your genre, and binge reading or binge watching, and attending conferences. We've talked about all of those, and that's what we do here on The Right Crowd. We talk about it.
I think what's interesting though that I've never considered doing at a writers conference, which I might have to do at whichever one it is that we decide to go to this year. We haven't decided that either. is go to sessions where it's open to everyone to attend, but where they're giving editorial advice to people and see what they're saying and what I can take away and use as my own, even though they might be telling you what you need to do with your manuscript. Some of it might be applicable to me. And like, because she actually says that go to the writers conference and be a voyeur,
Yeah.
check everything out, which I hadn't really, usually I'm like, I'm not there yet. I don't need to, but I mean, it's free information.
It's true. And that's also a good way to find critique partners or an editor, is because they'll be on panels and they'll talk about how they edit or some things they found or the genres they edit in. And it's a great way to learn as well.
Yeah. In the next section where she talks about getting editorial feedback, she again mentions critique groups. So your first step could be a critique group if you are trying not to spend a lot of money.
Yes.
Besides, I personally, I haven't had to spend the money yet because I haven't gotten anything to a point where anyone has to look at it yet. However, I would think that the top two things that will cost me the most money are editing and cover art.
Yeah.
And if I can save a little money on the editing, well, here's the thing. You can save money on editing and do some of these things. But maybe you have a budget that allows you to just send it off and save this step. You could do that too. You could send it off, have it edited, do all the things, and then send it to your beta readers and have them look at it and skip the critique group part. But if you are trying to save some money or you want to see what other people think about it, go with the critique group. But she also gives you some mind your P's and Q's for critique groups in here. What to look for, what not to do. Because you can't, I mean, you can, I mean, depending on who you are, you could, and you just go to a critique group and tell people how horrible they are and how great your stuff is. And
Don't
I
do
mean,
that.
they won't ask you to come back.
Don't.
So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest doing that.
And we did do an episode on critique partners and how to be a good critique partner, which is what she talks about in here. How to be a good critique partner and how to accept a critique and what to look for in a good critique group, which is handy. Like, it will have rules. New members will not be allowed to submit work for critiques until they've been there a while critiquing others' work. So putting in some time, because you don't want to be one of those authors who just comes in, submits your work, gets your critique back, and then leaves and doesn't help out others.
Right.
So it's
You need to
about
contribute.
and sharing and contributing, and about the different styles, like being positive and constructive and respectful. And she talks about how to find a critique group and about trading edits with a writing partner, which is handy. And it's not easy to find a writing partner. So you especially want to be respectful and be, put in the work so that you don't lose a writing partner or critique partner when you find one, because they are not easy to find, especially ones that are in your genre and at the same level or maybe a little above you and will help you out, and you help them out as well as a good reader of the material. So it's a really good section. It's really, please don't skip that if you mean to do any critiquing yourself or request a critique.
Yep. It's a good one. And she goes through all the things. So there's lots of bullet points in this chapter that need to be looked at. And then she talks about hiring a pro, which we kind of already discussed at the beginning,
Well,
but she,
I just want to say, before she talks about doing a pro, she also talks about beta readers, which can be helpful for
yes.
feedback. So that's another important step to either do also, or one time or many times for your book, depending on your book. And I did want to say
Ooh,
about editing, about story editing and maybe saving money. There are some authors who suggest that you don't need to get a developmental or story edit. And Dean Wesley Smith is one of those. And I've taken many of his classes. And he is one of those people that he just writes it, he gets it right, and he polishes it. So, but it depends on where you are as an author, and you will know or you should know, especially if you read any of these books that Amy and I come on here and talk to you about and do any of the things that we learn in these books or at conferences. I just wanted to put that out there. So then in hiring a pro, I think that's where we were.
She gives you a checklist for determining whether or not you're ready to hire someone. Yeses and nos, because hiring someone before you're ready is not good for either one of you, especially if you've done your research and you found the person you want to use. If you send them something before you're ready, you could lose them. And then you'll have to figure out who's the second best for you. Also, in this, I think Audrea can attest to this. Sometimes you think you found the person, and sometimes they're not the person.
Nope.
And it's okay to step back and say, you're not the person.
You're not the person. It'll cost you. So that's why you want to be careful and always take advantage of the sample edit. Most
Yes.
editors, most good editors will ask you for a sample chapter or 2 chapters or 3 chapters of a word count from your book. And then they will edit it and they will send it back to you. And the purpose of that is for you to understand their style and their critique and see if it's right for you, and for them to see if you are at a point or right in a style that they can edit. And it's mutually beneficial.
She actually says in here that if the editor you've picked balks at doing a sample edit, to walk away. To walk away. And then she says, get them down to your top 3, just like if you were hiring a contractor, top 3, and do the sample edits with them. Just so you can make sure that you are on, like, I can say whatever I need to say, but can I do what it is that you're asking me to do? Is what you need to find out in your sample edits.
Right. And maybe you have tried to find an editor when what you need is a book coach or an author coach. And that's something you can look into as well. And so in here, she talks about the different types of editing. Again, the 4 types are the developmental or substantive or story edit. That's about the story. And then, and then the plot, the structure, characters, and all that stuff, if that all works. And the line edit, which we just talked about. The copy edit, also that's at the mechanics, the grammar, the punctuation, sometimes called a proofread, which also see what kind of editing your editor is going to do. Make sure they have a good description of which kind of editing they're going to do, and make sure you get what you're expecting.
Right.
And then the proofread, which of course is the very last one you do before you put it out into the world. And I have to say, and many professional authors who use professional proofreaders say, no matter how many people look at your books, like you've got it, this editor, that editor, the third editor, the beta readers, and then a proofreader, and all of this, and you've read it, your mama read it, and you hit publish, and then the very next thing you get back is you have no period at the end of this sentence, and you misspelled hot dog. And it's like, it happens. So
yeah. Okay, so she does go into rates and what you should be looking for, questions you should ask. If an editor is not willing to give you a firm quote in writing with your sample returned, walk away.
Yes. Which is a good tip.
And do not work for anyone that will not give you a contract with all the terms spelled out clearly. Yep. You should not be trying to figure out what they mean.
And she gives some good sort resources out here, like the predators and editors, where you can look up editors that you've come across to make sure they're not on the predators and editors list. These are people that prey on writers and just take your money and then either don't give you anything or give you a bad product in return. And there's writer beware. She lists that in here. And she also talks about writer editors and about how sometimes your grammar school English teacher is not the best person to edit your science fiction epic, fantasy, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because it's a different type of editing. So don't shortchange yourself by trying to save money and have your mom do it. I mean, they can read it for you and give you, but just know what you're getting and make sure you take advantage of the sample.
Most mamas don't want to break your heart.
Yes, a lot of that, except mine. Sorry, I digress.
I said most.
Yes, you did. Yes,
Most.
you did. So anyway, that's it for Intuitive Editing, a creative and practical guide to revising your writing by Tiffany Yates Martin. It's a very good book, and especially it's a book for you no matter where you are, from beginner writer to advanced writer. If you are doing the edits on your book or looking to find an editor, it's a good resource or reference book, and it's also a good practical book to use
Yes.
as your
It's
editor.
one that you'll keep on your shelf to pull out whenever you're like, wait, what am I supposed to be looking for here?
Yeah, and it's funny, you said you've got yours in a hardcover and I've got mine in the paperback. And I was like, oh, I wish I had the hardcover because this one is already turned this way and folded.
And you know what's funny is my back part page, I just noticed as I was closing it, has come apart. And I was like, oh, maybe I should have gotten the paperback. But actually, for sitting on a shelf to be able to pull out multiple times, I prefer the hardback because the paperback you have to like move stuff out of the way to get it to finagle in. This I can just like, shove it in and
There's no shoving this. The things will get all bent.
yeah.
Anywho, or shoving it into a bag with your manuscript or something like that. Anyway, that's it for Intuitive Editing. We hope you go out and buy the book. Hope you enjoyed these videos, and
And
please
subscribe.
can subscribe.
Notice I didn't say that on the last video.
I didn't notice, probably for the best. I love this. After you've completed your manuscript and you're standing at the foot of Revision Mountain. Anyway, this is the book to get. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Oi.